Welcome. Today we are going beyond the gate to talk about the legendary anime Death Note. Let's begin. One day, Light Yagami, a high school student, sees a notebook fall to the ground. After class, he takes the notebook home with him. At home, Light reads the rules of the Death Note and tries it on a criminal that he saw on TV. And when it works, he tries it a few times later. Light decides to use the Death Note to start killing criminals. A few nights later, Ryuk, the death god who dropped the notebook, meets Light. Light explains he's passing judgment on the wicked and hopes to become the god of this new world. Light's actions, or as he's called Kira by other people on the internet, gets the attention of the International Criminal Police Organization. During the meeting, Watery brings a laptop where everyone hears from L, who's going to be investigating this case. During a TV broadcast, it changes where Lind L. Taylor poses as L and insults Kira. Light, insulted by this, kills him. L then reveals that this was a trap and now knows where Kira lives and more about how his powers work. They both vow to defeat each other. Later on in the story, it's revealed that Light's actually Chief Yagami's son, the same man who's in charge of the Kira case. Watery informs L that the FBI has entered Japan to investigate the police. Ryuk tells Light that someone is following him. Light refuses the Shinigami Eye deal because it would limit his reign as god of the new world. Because even though it allows him to see people's names by simply looking at the person's face, it also has his lifespan. To catch Rei, the man that's been following him, Light manipulates Osoreda, a murderer, to board the same bus as him to Space World. Light is able to manipulate Rei to show him his ID badge to confirm he's not working with Osoreda on this bus jacking. Light takes a piece of one of the pages in the Death Note and has it fall out of his pocket, which causes Osoreda to grab it. He then sees Ryuk, panics, runs out of the bus, and then is hit by the car, exactly as Light planned it. Light manipulates Rei at the train station to board a train and write down the names of the 12 FBI agents who were sent to Japan, which caused them to die of heart attacks, and he also dies of a heart attack when he exits the train. Meanwhile, the Japanese police force agreed to meet L after this event occurred. During their meeting with L, the police discuss the future plans for the Kira case. Light, meanwhile, brings his father clothes at the police station. It's there he meets Naomi, who has information on Kira. Light and Naomi talk outside since no police officer are present for her to talk to. She revealed that Kira can kill in ways besides heart attacks and can prove it, which scares Light, who decides he has to stop her. Light writes down the name that Naomi gave him, but it doesn't work, revealing it to be an alias. Through clever manipulation and quick thinking, Light convinces Naomi to reveal her true name, and well, you know the rest. L concludes that since Rei investigated Light, they should put cameras in his room. Light figures this out when he returns home. Light also figured out that the broadcast of the 1500 FBI agents was false and kinda gloats about it while on camera, which causes L to suspect him. In his room, Light takes a chip and eats it while killing people with a mini TV. L's report task force indicates that the tapes didn't show anything suspicious, but he's not satisfied, so he tries the direct approach and removes the cameras from Light's room. L and Light both pass the entrance exam with the highest scores and read a speech to the whole crowd 3 months later. After the speech, L reveals to Light that he is in fact L the detective, and well, let's just say Light does not take this too well when he gets home. Sometime later, Light defeats L in a game of tennis. Then they go to a cafe where L outsmarts Light using messages Kira made criminals write. Both visit Light's father, who had a heart attack. And then sometime later, Kira forces Sakura TV to play tapes sent by threatening everyone in the company. During the broadcast, many TV personalities are killed, and Hirokazu dies trying to stop the broadcast. Soichiro is able to break into the building with an ambulance and stops the broadcast himself. We learn that this is not the acts of Light, but rather a second Kira, who we learn to be Misa Amane, who happens to be a Kira fangirl and also has the Shinigami eyes. Light and L both agree that this is the work of a second Kira, as they're both working on the case together. They send a response video. In her response video, the second Kira agrees to meet with the original Kira, but also mentions Shinigami, which causes L to freak out. Later on, Rem reveals to Misa that the reason why she has a second Death Note is because Jealous died after using it to save Misa, which is a taboo for Shinigami. Light and Matsuda travel to the location to find the second Kira, going by the location sent by the second Kira. Misa in disguise sees no lifespans by Light, which reveals him to be Kira. Even with the Shinigami eyes, you still can't see the lifespan of someone if they are using a Death Note. Misa decides to do an in-face meeting with Light, so she goes to his house reveals her death note, her Shinigami eyes, and requests to be his girlfriend. When asked why she wants to do all this, it's because Kira killed the people that killed her parents, and Light agrees to be her boyfriend. Light asks Misa to kill L, and threatens her with the death note, but Rem says she will kill him if anything happens to Misa. To make matters worse, Light learns that Misa is a model, so being covert is going to be difficult. On the next visit to his house, Light is able to convince Rem to kill L, so he and Misa can be happy. Light convinces Misa still at the house to leave through kissing her. Later on, we see the task force examine the tapes from the second Kira. L tells Light at school that if he dies the next few days, then Light is Kira, which obviously puts a damper into Light's plans. After a photo shoot, Misa goes to Light, but also sees L. Light realizes that Misa now knows his name and then tries to call her. Unfortunately, L took her phone, so he picks up instead of Misa. L gets another call revealing that the police arrested Misa because of DNA evidence on the tapes, and then he tells Light this. During her interrogation, Rem convinces Misa to give up the death note, which removes her memories from using it, but not that Light is her boyfriend. Light agrees to save Misa after Rem threatens him. She also told him the whole situation. Light gives up ownership of Rem's death note, but has memories of it thanks to keeping Ryuk's. He surrenders to police custody because he could be Kira subconsciously. While in custody, he tells Ryu to get rid of it, which is the code word for giving up ownership of the other death note. His father also goes into custody and will have outside knowledge, unlike Light and Misa, of what's happening. Despite not having the death note, there are still reports of people dying by heart attacks, which means that Kira is still executing criminals. We see a businessman writing down names with the death note. After 50 days of confinement, L asks Soichiro to do something to prove if Light is Kira. He takes Light and Misa into a car and then threatens to kill Light and himself, literally pointing a gun at Light and fires a blank round. Since no one died, Light's name is technically clear at this point, but Misa will still have cameras in her room, and Light and L must be handcuffed to each other, so I guess it's not cleared, and Matsuo becomes Misa's agent. In the new task force building, Light and L have a fight, when L becomes depressed, having realized that Kira's power transfers from person to person. Later on, after the fight is broken out, Light tries to cheer L by mentioning that the Yatsuba company has been doing well despite every company around them having many issues. Due to Kira bribing politicians, their task force wasn't legally allowed to hunt him, so Seiichiro, Mogi, and Matsuo stay on as unofficial members, but Aizawa leaves because he needs the money. After Aizawa leaves, L introduces Iber, a con man, and Uedi, a cat burglar, to help with their investigation. After a phone call from L reveals that he's the second and third greatest detective under different aliases, one of whom was hired by the Yatsuba company to find L. Matsuda is caught after following two men in the Yatsuba organization. To save his life, Matsuda tells them that he wants Misa to be featured in a commercial campaign. After they meet Misa, they agree to do this and have a party. And during the party, the team fakes Matsuda's death by him jumping off the balcony, but landing on a mattress, while Iber pretends to be him on the floor, dead. Uedi sets up the camera footage of the Yatsuba group, and when the team watches it, they see that only 7 members were present when 8 were expected to be there, because Hattori was the dead 8th member who questioned the Kira killings to begin with. During Yatsuba's group's meeting, Light calls Namikawa, posing as L, to try to stop the killings by offering pardons to everyone other than the guy they think is Kira. Namikawa is able to pause the killings for 1 month, so Coil, the second greatest detective, can discover L's identity. Before the interview can commence, the Yatsuba group learns from Coil about Misa's connection to Kira, and Higachi determines that Misa must be a second Kira, and he wants to marry her. Mogi now takes over as Misa's agent since Matsuda is quote-unquote dead for the interview. Halfway through the interview, Misa goes to the bathroom and Rem uses a piece of the death note to touch her hand. Rem then talks to Misa and reveals everything that she forgot. When Misa returns from the bathroom, Rem reveals Higachi as the third Kira. Against Light and L's wishes, she starts to investigate the different Yatsuba members. She switches with Nori to fool Mogi at the hospital restroom. Then Misa goes out with Higachi and convinces him through Rem's help that she's the second Kira. Misa agrees to marry Higachi if he stops killing on TV as proof of his power, which she agrees to. Later on, Misa reveals the entire conversation that was recorded to prove that Higachi is in fact Kira and guilty. To catch Higachi, L comes up with a plan to host a 3-hour Kira special to reveal Kira's identity, and Matsuda will be part of the special. Namikawa, under Light's direction, calls Higuchi about the broadcast. Higuchi initially denounces the broadcast until Hotari's death is mentioned, and the cover falls off Matsuda's face. Since Misa nor Mogi picked up the phone when he called them, he then calls the president of the Yoshida Productions to get Matsuda's name. Instead of the name, they tell him where to find the files, so Higuchi heads over there. Once Matsuda's alias doesn't work, Higuchi makes the deal for the eyes and heads to the Yatsuba group to get Matsuda's name from the footage, but the tapes were switched. When that fails, he goes to Sakura TV directly when he realized it was set up in a trap since Matsuda is no longer there, replaced by a stock dummy. His attempt to flee was stopped by a police roadblock and Watari, who shoots the tire, stopping the car. After his arrest, Higuchi reveals that he kills through a notebook. Light gets the Death Note, reclaims his memories, then kills Higuchi to regain ownership of the Death Note. It's revealed that Light had Ryuk write fake rules in the Death Note. The 13-day rule proves Misa and Light's innocence, so Misa is let go and finds our Death Note buried a few months earlier. Misa makes eye deal with Ryuk and then reunites with Light, and Rem learns that Misa had less than a month to live. We see a flashback of L's childhood, where Watari took care of him at Whammy's house. Misa starts killing people again, which makes L suspicious of her. Light and L talk in the rain, and afterwards L reveals a plan to test the 13-day rule, and Rem kills L and Watari to protect Misa and dies in the process. Light becomes a god of the new world. After L's death, the rest of the team thinks Light should become the next L. Soichiro agrees to hide the Death Note. Light asks Misa to live with him. Light kills Ibar, Weedy, and the 6 remaining members of the Yatsuba group. The story skips ahead to April 2012. Light is now 23, part of the National Police Force. We see footage from Whammy's house, where one of the head people in the orphanage learned that Watari and L have died, with the two onlooking orphans, Nier and Mello. Roger tells both Nier and Mello since L didn't choose a successor, they would have to work together. 5 years later, Nier now works with the US President to form the Special Provisions Group for Kira, called the SPK. Nier explains how the Death Note works, using information they acquired over 3 years of investigation. Sayu, who's now much older, asks Light why he hasn't married Misa yet during a much lighthearted scene. Later on, the director of the police, Takimura, was kidnapped, with the kidnappers demanding a Death Note in return for his life. The kidnapper is revealed to be Mello, who believes that there are 2 Death Notes, one that Kira has and one that the police force has. Light used the Death Note to kill Takimura, but not before Mello learned that Yagami is the head of the police force. Takimura's death backfires, as it indicates that Kira can't kill any of Mello's group because he doesn't know their name or faces. Mello kidnaps Sayu as a backup plan, and uses her as a bargaining chip instead. The police force get instructions to drop the book in LA in 2 days. Soichiro agrees to this despite everyone being hesitant. Light calls the FBI as L, and the agent passes the phone to Nier per instruction, and Nier calls Light the second L. He reveals his name as Nier, and the higher-ups know that L died. Nier tells Light to handle the hostage negotiation with his team. Light and Misa and the entire task force head to Los Angeles. Before Soichiro can board one of the planes they'd planned on, he's forced to board a different plane. That plane makes an emergency landing in the middle of a desert. Then Soichiro is instructed to head downstairs to an underground area where he trades the Death Note for Sayu. The Death Note gets away on a missile, and Mello uses it to kill many members of the SPK. Sido, a death god, goes to the human world to get his Death Note back from Ryu. Sayu is shown to be in shock after what happened and requires 24/7 care. Matsuda and Aizawa return from the orphanage to learn that Nier of the SPK was one of those gifted students besides Mello. Sido meets Mello and tells him that the last 2 rules of Death Note are fake. To kill Mello, Light uses Misa to learn which member of Mello's mob has the Death Note. He then uses the Death Note to make him forward the names of the Mafia location and associates. He then forfeits Rem's Death Note, but keeps jealousies on him to not lose the memory of the Death Note. Kira contacts the task force using Misa. He sends them a Death Note and instructs the task force to get Kira's older Death Note. Soichiro takes the Death Note, does the ideal, and leads the assault team. They take back the original Death Note, but Soichiro is unable to kill Mello after declaring his name Maiko Kiel. He's shot by one of Mello's henchmen. Soichiro dies happy knowing that Light can't be Kira since he can see his lifespan. Light gives back Sido the Death Note. The President of the United States declares neutrality with Kira, which makes Light happy, but Nier very angry. Meanwhile, Mel, who survived the explosion in the previous episode, breaks in and uses Hal Linder to find Near. Near gives Mello the only picture of him, and in return, Mel tells him about the Shinigami and some of the Death Note rules are fake. After a call that took place between Near and the task force, many members of the task force, including Aizawa, start to doubt Light and even consider taking Near's offer to talk to him in private. Later on, the host of Kira's kingdom, Hotoshi, leads a mob of people to the SBK's headquarters. Misa watches from her computer, prepping to kill the SBK members as they flee the building. Light hacks Near's computer, blaming Mello for this. The SBK escapes by dropping buckets of L's inheritance to distract the mob and wore riot gear. Later on, Aizawa calls Near and tells him about Shinigami Eyes, the 13-day rule, and everything else that went by when L was in confinement. Light and Misa go under surveillance to prove they're innocent. Toshi is shown to be killed by Mikami, someone that Light gave the Death Note to after Misa forfeited ownership of it. Episode 32. We learn about Mikami's past as someone who stood for justice since he was a child and always enamored by Kira, so he was honored when he was chosen to be the one to pass judgment. Mikami picks Kiyomi to be Kira's next spokesperson, Light's former college girlfriend. Light takes advantage of their past to reunite with her. She agrees and they meet up in a bugged room. During the reunion, Light seduces Kiyomi, and lucky for him, Mikami calls, asks Kiyomi to pass the phone to Light, then recognizes through a code that it's Kira on the other end and proves he's Kira by killing another Kira spokesperson. Light then uses this to remove the bugs, reveals his identity to Kiyomi, and the two agree to work together while embracing. Near heads to Japan and tells Light about it once he arrives. Light agrees to his challenge and notes that later on defeating Near will make him the god of the world. During another date between Light and Kiyomi, he instructs her to start killing people as Kira, and to tell Mikami to stop using the real Death Note and instead write names in a fake one. Misa is frustrated that she's not headlining the music festival and takes her anger on Kiyomi after running into her. Hal Linder stops her before anything happens. Misa later on has dinner with Kiyomi, and during that dinner, Misa taunts Kiyomi about Light proposing to her and that Kira will be caught with Kiyomi being executed. Giovanni, who's been following Mikami on the train, watches them kill a criminal on the train. Before the next date, Aizawa plants a mark on the bottom of the 4 notepads to prove that Light is passing notes to Kiyomi. During the date, Light explains to Kiyomi about Misa and explains that he's not interested in her. While this happens, we cut to Giovanni observe Mikami sitting by himself and saying, "Is that you, Shinigami?" After the date, Aizawa discovers that in the hotel room, 2 notepads were missing, which proves that notes were being passed. Near tells Aizawa that he already figured out that Light and Taka were passing notes. Near then gets Misa and Mogi into custody because she could be the second Kira. While Mikami works out, Giovanni breaks into his locker and touches the Death Note. Because of the 23-day rule, Near needs to meet with Light on the 24th day, if Giovanni is still alive. Near figures out a pattern in the pictures taken by Giovanni the Death Note and comes up with a plan to stop Kira. The days roll on and eventually Mikami sends Kiyomi. He confirmed it. Near calls Light to schedule a face-to-face meeting with both teams, agreeing to all the conditions from both parties. The meeting will be on January 28th at 1 p.m. Kiyomi is later on kidnapped by Mello and Matt when she walks on the red carpet. The police kill Matt during this. After Mello forces her to take her clothes off and wear a blanket, alone, Kiyomi uses a piece of notebook in her bra and a pencil to write Mello's name in the Death Note as Light instructed her. She is able to retrieve her phone and contacts Light for help. He tells her to write names as the rescue team comes. Light writes Kiyomi's name on a piece of the Death Note in his watch and has her light everything on fire. The day finally arrives for the meeting and both teams head to the warehouse. When the task force gets there, Near is shown wearing a mask and removes it 30 minutes later in case Kira had control of anyone in the room. Mikami arrives later and peeks through the door and starts writing down everyone's names except for Light. Near tells everyone to not worry because they replaced the pages with fake ones. Light explains his plans while thinking out loud. Giovanni had been tampering with what he thought was the real Death Note, but in actuality was a fake Death Note. In reality, Kiyomi was killing people using pages from the real Death Note after Mikami sent photos of the people to her. He was using a fake Death Note to get everyone to focus on him. But in this moment, Mikami had the real Death Note and they kept that hidden. Light asks Mikami if he was done, and as the 4 seconds start counting down, Light declares victory. To Light's surprise, no one died after the 4 seconds passed. After taking the death note from Light, Nia reveals that only Light's name wasn't written down. Nia revealed that they replaced the death note with the fake one, and Nia shows the actual death note which he had the whole time. Nia also says hello to Ryuk to prove that the death note is in fact real. Because Mikami acted strange and went against his routine, it raised suspicion, and he used the real death note to kill Kiyomi when Light already did. Giovanni was able to duplicate a death note in one night. Light stalls for time by claiming the death note could be fake, but Matha shoots him before he can write the page on his watch. Mikami stabs himself, which allows Light to escape, but the task force goes after him. Light escapes to another warehouse where Ryuk writes his name down as promised he always would. Light dies, Mikami dies, and Misa appears on top of an old task force building, which is up to interpretation of what happened. And that's Death Note. Thanks for spending your time with me today. It was a long one, but a good one. Please subscribe if you like this video and want more, and I will see you next time we go beyond the gate to explore another awesome anime.